threat, a hoax threat, that would be of extraterrestrial origin. There is no evidence that we are under any threat from any civilization from outside our solar system or within our solar system. However, there is a lot of evidence from this testimony that there are people who are deliberately trying to weaponize space under the guise of many situations which are really hoaxed scenarios. This is dangerous because if we are not alone in the universe, we cannot view space as our own private domain for Homo sapiens. We must view space as a frontier which must be shared peacefully with diverse life forms from throughout the universe. One of the points I would like to make also about these cases is that we must accept the testimony of all of these witnesses. The reason we must is that if we begin to dismiss dozens of military intelligence officers, corporate officials, as well as people within other walks of life who have professional credentials, their testimony on this issue, then it brings into question how we view witness testimony on many other things. If we use that same standard, every murder conviction in the United States should be overturned, which has been based on witness testimony. We would also, as Monsignor Balducci at the Vatican has pointed out to us, throw out the entire Bible, since that is almost totally based on human witness testimony of the people who wrote down the accounts during the times of Christ and his predecessors.
Storico è vissuto un uomo che si chiamava Gesù.
Can show that at a certain historical point lived a man named Jesus.
E questa dimostrazione si basa sulle testimonianze degli storici.
And in the end, this is based on human witness testimony.
Perché come facciamo a sapere che quel Vangelo è di quello lì, quell'altro è di quello là?
And how do we know that this gospel is from that man and this gospel is from this man is true?
E sono le testimonianze che
And they
abbiamo
are the testimony and the witnesses of those people.
Per cui, se si indebolisse il valore della testimonianza
if you
umana,
start taking apart and destroying the value of human witness testimony,
le conseguenze sono anche gravi, gravissime, tragiche per la religione, specie per la religione cristiana.
The consequences are grave, tremendous, especially for Christian religion.
I should emphasize that this human testimony is key, and in a sense it's more important than any physical evidence because it is multiple, it is corroborating, and it can not be tossed out in a cavalier fashion. We should be very careful that we do not ignore this testimony because the testimony of these men and women serves as a significant body of evidence with the corroboration of photographs and other government documents. To introduce this part of the videotape, which deals specifically with pilots, radar cases, cases that involved telemetry and related technologies, I wish to emphasize that for decades, people who have been skeptical of this subject have claimed that if these objects were real, they would have been tracked on radar. We have no fewer than 20 witnesses from the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, the Army, as well as civilian authorities in the United States and abroad who are qualified air traffic controllers and pilots who have seen these objects on radar. Please note that these people absolutely will state that these have not been weather balloons, they have not been air inversions, they have not been swamp gas. They have been structured craft traveling at thousands of miles per hour, then suddenly stopping, hovering, or moving in a nonlinear fashion where these objects have been tracked and going from one spot to 500 miles away or further within one radar sweep. Commander Graham Bethune piloted his plane across the North Atlantic in 1951. The testimony you will hear is important and significant for a number of reasons. The object was very close. It was in 1951 and was tracked on radar moving at 1,800 miles per hour. a speed which no craft in the world could move at that time in those speeds. Additionally, we've been able to locate his co-pilot as well as documents from the government of his official debriefing and report, which was made by the Navy and the military at that time.
The flight was normally about 10 hours, but that night we had a 60-knot wind, and it was a headwind. And about maybe 300 to 400 miles outside of Keflavik, out of Argentia, I'm sorry, I saw something below the horizon on the water that looked like approaching a city at night. It was just kind of an ambient light, no definition whatsoever, but the same thing that you would see if you were approaching a large city at night. And all of a sudden we saw on the water a yellow halo that was very, very small, about 15 miles away. And it came up to 10,000 feet like that, a fraction of a second. And I thought it was going to go right through us. And I disengaged the autopilot, pushed the nose over because I was going to go under it at the angle it was coming toward me. So what happened, the minute that I did that, it was up at our altitude, and I could see nothing outside of the cockpit but this craft. And so I didn't know which way to go. And then all of a sudden I heard a racket. I didn't know what it was. And I said, "Fred, what the hell was that?" He looked around and he says, "Oh," he said, "everyone was ducking in the back of us, and they collided, and they're all laying on the deck back there, scrambling on the deck." So when I looked back, it wasn't there. And he says, "It's over here on the right-hand side." Now, it was about a mile or so away on the right-hand side, and it kind of drifted forward maybe to a position maybe 5 miles away, and that's where it stayed with us for quite some time. This is when we could first see, it wasn't above our altitude, it was below our altitude, but it's still above the horizon where you could see the side of the craft, you could see the dome, and you could see the color around the perimeter of the craft. And then we knew that it was a friendly encounter. I said, "Doc, did you see what we saw?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, he looked me straight in the eye. He says, "Yeah." He says, "It was a flying saucer." So I went back forward and I said, "Dal, whatever you do, don't tell anybody we saw anything. He'll lock us up as soon as we get on the ground." He said, "It's too late." He said, "I just called Ganner to control to see if they could track this by radar." So that's how it got out. So when we landed at Argentia, the Air Force was there, and they interrogated us. And the captain that did the interrogation did a real good job, but you could tell that this wasn't his first time that he'd ever interrogated anybody as far as these craft were concerned. When that question was asked, it was 300 feet that came in my mind. And when I got the report out of the archives in 1991, I'd never seen anybody else's report. Everyone had been anywhere from 250 to 350 feet in diameter. Now, the velocity when it left us was estimated from between 1,000 miles an hour to 2,000 miles an hour. And when I looked at the report, Al Jones estimated 1,800 miles an hour. Mine was 1,000, another one was 1,500 miles an hour, in that range. It turns out that the radar report, which I've never seen, said it was 1,800 miles an hour. So the other plane commander was sitting in the seat, took my seat, he hit it right on the nose. Now my boss, that's another thing. When he found the report in the archives in Wright-Patterson on Project Blue Book, and talking to Colonel Watson, when he came back to me, he gave me the speed of 1,800 miles. I said, "Where did you find that out?" And he said, "Well, it was a radar report that said that." The document that I found was the official document that the Air Force had put together, different sources that came to them. And it was originally filed, it was under Project Grudge, you can see in their written Project Grudge, but on the front page it says Project Twinkle. Now this is where they put a lot of ones that they had to get rid of somehow. It was Project Twinkle. So it was in Project Blue Book and Project Grudge and what other project I don't know that was in.
Michael Smith was an air traffic controller with the Air Force, both in Oregon as well as subsequently in Michigan. At both of these facilities, he witnessed UFOs tracked on radar moving at extraordinary speeds, and he also confirms that NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, was fully apprised of these events, and in fact, in one of these events in Michigan, was engaged and steered B-52s returning to a base around